All right, welcome again, all. So this is the Thursday evening drill. Thursday evening drill, which is where we, 5 different weeks, talk about different things. And this week, the topic is whatever I want it to be, which is code for key Buddhist teachings. We talked about karma, we talked about no self. Tonight, we're going to talk about another slippery one, emptiness. Emptiness comes up a lot in Buddhist teachings. And it causes a lot of confusion. So hopefully after tonight, it won't cause as much confusion, but we'll see. Begin with a little story about how emptiness shows up. And it's a kind of a sequence of the Buddhist teachings. So the Pali Canon, which is generally recognized to be the earliest teachings, the earliest documented teachings. In that set of teachings, Buddha was very clear. You see this forest, all the trees, all the leaves on all the trees. All you need is this handful of leaves. This is what I teach. The rest of that, interesting, but not relevant. I teach this handful of leaves because what I'm teaching is I'm teaching how you can end your dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, stress, how you can be released from it. That's all that it's all I care about for you, is how you can find peace. So just this handful of things. The Indic teaching traditions of the time had lots of lists. They were heavily numerological. There's 108 beads on that chain around Havana's neck around this one in place. 108 is 2 squared times 3 cubed. It's just math. Play around with numbers. So there were lots of lists, and they're very useful because they're ways of the mnemonics that help us find different ways of investigating the world and deconstructing it and finding our way through our illusions to recognize that it's precisely our illusions and delusions that cause our suffering. But there's a tendency to get caught on lists. And at some point, fairly early on in the trajectory of Buddhist teachings, there were folks who said, you know, you're stuck on the lists, too many dharmas. And what you think is there's no self, but these dharmas are real. And so you need to let go of those dharmas too. And so we had this new school, as it was called, the Mahayana. It's not really a school, it's a whole bunch of different schools. It's really diverse. The premise in a little more detail was that those teachings about release from suffering were about letting go of this thing here I call a me. Because it's when I hold on to things, when I construct an identity out of stuff, that I create suffering. Because creating that identity puts up a barrier between me and everything else. And that barrier is the problem. So I remove that barrier by removing the illusion that there is this separate self. That's the heart of that way of approaching it. And the innovation, if you will, came because some of the schools at the time, they really did start getting stuck on the lists, and they started thinking that the dharmas, which were the contents of the lists, the things that we investigate, some of those, they're like atoms. There was a reality to those, something concrete. And these new teachings said, no such thing. Those two are empty. So it's like there's emptiness here, but there's also emptiness out there. Now I'm throwing that word around. We'll use that word more. So we come to, so what happened, one of the axial teachings, if you will, there's a guy by the name of Nagarjuna, and he wrote a treatise called the Mula Madhyamika Karika, which roughly, well, my translation is the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. And it's written in it's very dense poetry as kind of a dialect. It's just a discussion between two voices. One voice is dominant, but there are opponents in there. And it's largely it's reductio ad absurdum. saying, well, if there's such a thing as a bell, then this, then this, then this, then this, and oh, that means there's no such thing as a bell. And if there's no bell, then, oh, but that means there must be a bell. So he's just proving whatever hypothesis he starts with doesn't work. So he's proving everything is, in his language, empty. Empty of what? Empty of inherent self, empty of identity, empty of essence. There's nothing in anything that you can hold on to. And then he went on to say, and emptiness itself is empty. So this thing we call emptiness, this thing we call no self, is also something we can't hold on to. So this goes round and round, and you get the Heart Sutra, which says form is emptiness. This is form, right? Everything is form. This is form. This is form. Form is empty. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. So it's like gibberish, but that's the teaching. And then it circles back to Tibet, and in Tibet it's like, okay, well, so there are these different levels of emptiness. You've got this level and this level and this level. And what you can see happening in this is, if we're not careful, precisely what the movement was a move away from. The movement was a move away from ideas. It's like we can get stuck on ideas, and so we need to let go of these ideas and move into emptiness. But by hypothesizing this thing called emptiness, we've created another thing which we can get stuck on. So now we've got to say, this thing itself is also empty. So you have the relative, as it's called, or the manifest, or the born, the stuff. You've got the absolute, or the unmanifest, or the unborn, or the deathless, which is this primordial no stuff. And these are then posited as extremes. So now you've got to say, but it's in the middle. It's neither this nor this. It's in the middle. And then there are schools where this too becomes a thing. So you get a fourth truth, which is letting go of that truth. So the problem with all of this is we're working in the realm of mind and making ideas and getting caught on these ideas is becoming a philosophy. Buddha, in the Pali tradition, the Theravada tradition, way back where we started, he actually did talk about emptiness. Didn't talk about it a lot, but he did talk about emptiness. And for the most part, that's not recognized or talked about and is ignored. Emptiness is an experience. That's not quite right, but it's the closest I can get. We are freed not by what we think, but by how we are in the world, how we manifest in the world, how we experience. Experience doesn't quite work because there's a sense of some content in an experience, and this is not really about content, but the experience of emptiness in the Theravada tradition. Buddha talks about consciousness without surface. So what happens as we settle into meditation, we've got this big ball of emotion, say this argument we had at work, or something that keeps on coming back. And we know that letting this keep on coming back, this is causing us stress. And so as we settle in, we try to not let that come into the mind. So at first there's effort to hold that down, to not look at it, think of something else, to la, la, la. So there's work to try and slow things down. But as we continue to practice, we become more adept at just gently looking at the other way, at realizing this noise is starting to arise and just not engaging with it, and it gently settles back down. And with this, we're moving into the experience of emptiness. We're moving into not that there's nothing, but we're not caught by anything. Stuff floats through us like clouds. Something unpleasant comes up, if it's a good day, we just don't look at it. If it's a bad day, maybe it drifts across, but we don't pay it any attention. It keeps going and it's gone. So this emptiness is a profound, is experiencing life, is living, and it happens first on the cushion, but it's this profound openness, this profound release, the peace and the calm that comes with that. There's another translation of this which I don't like, and I'm going to use it because I want to distinguish between the two. And it's boundless. That word is often translated, shunyata has been translated as boundless. Boundless feels different. In the jhanas, which is a narrative description of absorption states, we go through the material jhanas and we end up in equanimity. And then the next one is boundless space. You get boundless space and then boundless consciousness. Boundless space is experienced by kind of recognizing that what we think of as the boundary of this self really isn't a boundary. It's kind of porous. It's stuff going in and out all the time. And we just recognize its porous nature. And so we can open up into space. And it's space without limit. That's boundlessness. That doesn't feel the same as this sense of release, the sense of openness, the sense that things don't land, things don't stick. There's a lovely sutra in which somebody's talking to the Buddha about this kind of thing. The Buddha says, okay, so you've got a room, build a one-room building, and there's a window, and the sun shines in through the window. Where does the sun land? On the far wall. If there's no wall, where does it land? On the ground. If there's no ground, where does it land? On the water. If there's no water, where does it land? Doesn't land. And that's the feeling of this emptiness. It's just the things that it would land on are just taken away, are left. And so nothing lands. It's just open and calm, cool. Nirvana means, literally, nibbana is the putting out a fire. It's the release of the flame. It's the release of the flame. And it's from a tradition where there's the four elements. And each element, the elements aren't, it's not like a primitive version of our periodic table. The elements are attributes, solidity, fluidity, warmth, motion. The elements represent that. And fire doesn't disappear. When you put the fire out in that tradition, the fire is released. Fire is released. And when it's released, it's cool. So this emptiness is cool in the same way as that released fire. That's what it feels like. The Diamond Sutra, which is the dominant sutra probably in the Zen tradition, it's in that sutra, there's two things that I'm going to pull on that are relevant. The first, it begins when Buddha wanders around. He goes out with his bowl, he begs for food, he comes back, he sits down, he eats his meal, and then he washes his bowl, lays out his robe, and sits. And then Subhuti comes up to him and says, circumambulates 3 times in a clockwise direction, etc., etc. And he says, Master, or Lord, you teach wisely, you teach well, you're so generous and kind to the disciples and bodhisattvas. Teach us one thing. How should Bodhisattva pacify their mind when they want to undertake the path. And the Buddha says, you've spoken wisely, you've spoken well, Subhuti. When a bodhisattva wishes to pacify their mind, they should pacify their mind thus. Subhuti doesn't get it, and he says, we eagerly await your answer, Master. But the answer was already there. And it's this complete letting go. It's this complete letting go. In the same vein, teacher asks student question. Student ponders a while, and then as the student starts to formulate the answer, starts to talk, the teacher puts their hand over the mouth. Just in that pause, just that pause, before it lands, before the answer is really formed, before anything happens, there's this moment of not landing, this moment of emptiness. Also in the Diamond Sutra, there's a line that shows up in a couple of different ways through the sutra, but there's a line which is famous as one of the foundational things in the Zen tradition, which is Huineng, who is the sixth patriarch of Zen, woodcutter, heard the Dharma Sutra being chanted, and when he heard the following line, and dropped all his sticks and the bottom fell out. He had this profound awakening. And the line was, awakening the mind that does not dwell. Same thing. Same thing. This is emptiness. Enough. Let me stop.